I've been on a mission to raise awareness about what I consider to be the greatest child abuse scandal in modern medicine history, telling girls that they're boys, boys that they're girls, and giving them puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and when children are being turned into lifelong pharmaceutical patients.
Lifelong, because these things don't heal.
That's right. So now, when they get to 20 or 25 years of age and they go, what the heck did you do to me? I was just a struggling kid who had been abused, or I had trauma, or a lot of these kids have autism, and now they're being taught that, oh, they must have been born wrong. Fundamentally, this whole ideology is based on a lie. This whole ideology teaches that some children were born wrong.
Right.
What a psychologically abusive thing to tell a child that she should be something she's not. That a boy, just because he's more effeminate, is really a girl on the inside.
Hey, Chris.
Hi.
Welcome to my podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Very nice to meet you.
You too.
I've heard lots about you.
I've had a wild adventure the past few years.
You have, haven't you?
Yeah.
Will you please tell my listeners, tell them your story?
Sure.
I don't know it
Okay.
yet.
So, I'm a Canadian. I'm a dad of 2 girls. I have a beautiful wife who's a teacher. My girls are 11 and 13 years old now. And for a little more than 3 years, I've been on a mission to raise awareness about what I consider to be the greatest child abuse scandal in modern medicine history, which is this business of telling girls that they're boys, boys that they're girls, and giving them puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones.
It's hard to believe every time I hear it, and I've heard it many times, but I still have a hard time believing you.
Me too. And what I do is I go outside into the real world. I learned all about this child abuse, and the more you learn, the crazier it gets. And so I decided to take a stand. I didn't want to look back at my life in 40 years and say I knew all about this child abuse and didn't do anything.
Right.
Because I felt I could make a difference. So I'm just kicking it old school, talking to people, face to face, like we're supposed to do as humans.
Right.
In the real world, not on Twitter, not in our echo chambers, but I go to busy downtown centers, I go to a lot of university campuses, and I just hang out, and I wear signs, and I'm sure I look kind of silly, but...
Where'd you get the sign idea?
Well, originally I put up a billboard, a real billboard. I followed the lead of Kelly J. Keane in England.
Yeah, they call her...
Posey Parker.
Posey Parker.
So she put up a sign at the Edinburgh train station that said, I love J.K. Rowling. I heart J.K. Rowling. And it got taken down after one day.
One day, yeah.
Because some people on Twitter complained that it was hateful. Because, of course, J.K. Rowling has spoken out in favor of women's rights and against this child abuse.
Yeah.
And that makes the trans activists angry.
Right.
But part of what I'm doing is about freedom of speech as well. So it bothered me, of course, this child abuse, but it also really bugs me that we're not allowed to talk about this, apparently. That people get fired from their jobs. People are afraid to talk about this. And when children are being turned into lifelong pharmaceutical patients and having body parts cut off.
Lifelong, because these things don't heal.
That's right. So they have to go on the cross-sex hormones forever.
Yeah.
Girls that go on testosterone, they're getting hysterectomies after 4 or 5 years because it causes vaginal and uterine atrophy. Right. So they're cutting out their uterus. Sometimes they're cutting out their ovaries as well.
Right.
So now when they get to 20 or 25 years of age and they go, what the heck did you do to me?
Yeah.
I was just a struggling kid who had been abused, or I had trauma, or a lot of these kids have autism. And now they're being taught that, oh, they must have been born wrong. Yeah. They were born in the wrong body. What does that mean?
What was your first hint to this in the very beginning? Can you remember?
Yeah, I just came across the term puberty blockers somewhere, I think on Twitter. And I said, what the heck are those? And so I looked it up. And of course, they're blocking puberty in children.
Yeah.
And I'm a dad of girls. And this is primarily a social contagion affecting girls. And so I wanted to learn all about it just for my own kids' sake. And the more you learn, as I said, the worse this gets. And it just really impacted me. And it felt like a calling for me to try to do something about it. So you would ask what got me going. Well, she put up this sign. It got taken down. So I put up a big billboard that said the same thing in Vancouver. I love J.K. Rowling.
Oh, okay.
And a Vancouver politician, Sarah Kirby Young is her name. She said it was hateful.
Oh, yeah?
She pressured Jimmy Patterson's sign company, and they took it down. And so then I was ready for that. And the news went viral. And I leveraged that into a quick little fundraising campaign. And a week later, had a sign up in San Francisco, and then Portland, LA, all throughout Utah, all throughout the metro in Washington, D.C., and then Times Square. So that was September of 2020.
And you went into the States and did that?
I put up billboards there.
Instead of going across Canada, why did you go in the States first?
To be honest, when the Vancouver billboard got taken down, a woman who works in Silicon Valley in San Francisco reached out, and she wanted to do one there.
Oh, I see.
So I said, okay, let's do it.
I see.
And then some people reached out from DC, and so I did all these actual billboards, which is where my nickname came from.
Yes, and
But then because I couldn't even put up a sign in Canada, and I have this mission to...
why couldn't you put a sign up in Canada?
None of the sign companies will work with me.
Oh, I see.
Because apparently this is hateful,
Right.
to tell the truth.
Tell the truth? Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. You get in a lot of trouble telling the truth.
So I had some signs made. The only thing I could do, I have no platform. I'm a nobody. I'm a guy living out in the suburbs of Vancouver, just living a normal life. I used to be an investment advisor. And so I have a mission to start conversations about this, because it's my philosophy that when enough parents learn what's going on, we're going to put a stop to this. And the doctors and the lawyers and the other people will wear their hats and help put a stop to this. And it's happening now.
Well, it's been 3 years. So what are the changes that you've seen in 3 years then?
Well, so I had signs made that I wear. I go outside. I talk to people downtown on university campuses. And I've had 20,000 conversations probably. I've reached hundreds of millions because I record these conversations. I put them on Twitter. Those get retweeted. Those get seen 1 million or 2 million times now.
Right.
And the change has been phenomenal. So at the beginning, nobody knew what puberty blockers were. The sign on my front usually says children cannot consent to puberty blockers. People will come up to me. They'll say, what are puberty blockers? Today, I get high fives, fist bumps all day long. People really respect what I'm doing
Oh, that's
because people are afraid to talk about this. They see what's going on now in society. They're learning about what's going on in schools, and they don't like it. But
Right.
most people don't know what they can do.
Uh-huh.
So it's been incredibly successful. Part of what I do is activating others to take action as well.
What's on your back?
My definition of a dad.
Oh, yeah?
So it says dad, a human male who protects his kids from gender ideology.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah, it should be in the dictionary.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And so I've made amazing friends. When I started going into the United States, when the borders opened back up, because it was during COVID that I started, I've made amazing connections down there. I work with all sorts of organizations. My favorite organization that I work with, my best friends, are Moms for Liberty.
Oh, yeah.
So they hadn't been talking about this at all, but I met Tiffany Justice, the co-founder, one day in a Twitter space, actually, and I told her what I was doing. And long story short, now there's 130,000 moms fighting against this.
Right. That was a good network to
Yeah.
join up with.
And I work with the Heritage Foundation, the biggest conservative think tank down there. I'm working with the Leadership Institute, specifically with their school board training program. So we help to train people to run for school board and win. But I've reached all sorts of people, and now as we saw in Canada just a couple months ago, we probably had 30,000 people across the country protesting.
Yes, that was big.
So
That's
it's taken off. Once people learn about this child abuse, they never forget.
Right.
And they learn more and more and more. So we now have even some politicians who are finally taking a stand. In Saskatchewan and Nova Scotia, the premiers have said, apparently the controversial thing, that parents should know when their own child has a new name and pronouns at school.
Yeah.
Because it's the practice of all these school districts, entire provinces, to hide from parents
Oh, yeah.
that their own girl now thinks she's a boy.
Yeah.
It's outrageous. They treat parents as though they are automatically abusive to their own children.
Well, they're transphobic. Parents, all parents.
And they're all guilty until proven innocent, apparently.
Yeah, right.
But the thing with teachers is they're already mandatory reporters. If they think there's abuse going on in the home, they already have to contact CPS. But with this, they treat parents as though they're automatically abusive. So we got to put a stop to that. But fundamentally, this whole ideology is based on a lie. This whole ideology teaches that some children were born wrong.
Right.
What a psychologically abusive thing to tell a child that she should be something she's not. That a boy, just because he's more effeminate, is really a girl on the inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
Historically, if you look at the studies, kids with gender dysphoria, a majority of them grew up to be gay. So
So now there's no gay people. There's just people that...
they're just trans.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean? Nobody can tell me. So when I have these conversations, I have all sorts of tactics that I use with people who don't know much about this. We just have a normal conversation, and almost everyone agrees. But with the radical left, who are very hostile,
Yeah. Do you talk to them too?
I talk to anybody.
Yeah. And have you talked to them? Some?
Thousands.
And how does that go when you talk to them?
Well, most of them can't have a conversation. They don't want to have a conversation.
No.
They're just angry.
Yeah.
But I'll say things, if they do stand there and want to have a conversation instead of just swearing at me,
Yeah.
I'll say things that they agree with. Like, for example, there's no right way to be a boy or a girl.
Right.
They're beautiful just as they are. And they all agree with that. They agree we shouldn't put children in some stereotypical box. But they have this blind spot where they don't see that they're pushing stereotypes to such a degree that they're now saying children should change their bodies forever.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't get it. They've been indoctrinated. So by saying things that they agree with, you lower the temperature of the conversation, and you create this moment of cognitive dissonance where there's now two competing ideas going on in their mind. They thought, oh, this guy Billboard Chris is some terrible bigot. But now he just said something very reasonable that I can't help but agree with. And it confuses them. So they're going to have to go home and think about this. And if you ask them questions to get them thinking about their own beliefs, that's the way you got to do this.
Asking questions.
Yeah, the Socratic method, right?
Yeah, asking questions. Yeah.
So I get them thinking. I do change hearts and minds sometimes, but when someone's really angry on the street, you're not going to change their mind right then.
No.
They're not ready to receive.
No, that's right. No.
But we don't really have to worry about them anyway. We just have to reach the people in the middle.
Right.
We don't know what's going on. And so in the States, in the last year, 20 states have passed legislation to stop this. I've helped with some of that legislation.
And stop this by what kind of...
Well, by legislating it away, by saying you
till
cannot...
what age?
Until 18.
18, okay. Well, that's
Now,
a start.
it's a start. For me, it's just a start. Now, doctors have sworn an oath to first do no harm. And they should never go straight to the most invasive procedure for anything.
Yes, I agree.
The practice, what these activists want is affirmation only. If a girl or a young woman says she's a boy or a man, they just say, wonderful. We're so glad you've discovered your true self.
Yeah.
And on their first appointment, they're getting puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones. But even as an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old, many of these children and young adults have autism. They almost all have other mental health problems or abuse or trauma. And they're not getting treated for that anymore.
Are you finding that creativity has anything to do with it? Creative kids?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because of the circles they end up in. Because this is primarily being pushed by the left. And for example, in Langley, British Columbia, at the Langley Fine Arts School, I spoke with some parents whose daughter had started identifying as a boy in middle school. 45 other girls in that one school all were identifying as male or non-binary.
Right.
Because this is a social contagion.
Yes.
And that's a liberal fine arts school
Right.
where you end up with more of the teachers pushing this.
Right.
And this is pushed by that.
Kids who are creative they're open-minded, so their categories aren't separate. They can see things in many different ways. I remember my first year of art school, they give you a brick, and they say how many different ways can you use this brick, and that's to see how creative you are, what different things you can do with that. And I can remember when I was a 12 or 13-year-old girl, I was pretty horrified that I was turning into a woman. And I didn't have any comorbidities of any kind, but yet it was still hard for me to believe and very disconcerting that I wasn't still this kid who was exactly the same as all my friends before, that were boys and girls. And it takes girls quite a long time to come to terms with that, and what a change it makes. And it can happen as early as 10 years old. Girls that grow up with no fathers go into puberty earlier. 10 or 11.
Yeah.
Well, they have no father. What's the best thing for them to do? Get married and have a baby so that they have a man to take care of them. So they get their period years before.
Wow.
I know.
Fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating. So, and now we're fatherless. There's so much fatherlessness.
Yes.
That girls are getting their period earlier and earlier.
That's a big part of this too. A lot of single moms
Yeah.
who are on the left of the political spectrum push this on their kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, 50% of the mums who push their kids into transgenderism have comorbidities of mental illness.
Yeah, one study that was done several years ago showed that 52% of these moms had borderline personality disorder.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's some of that going on. One message I just want to communicate is that I'm just one person and I'm nobody. And I just
We're
have
all like that,
yeah, we are. And I just have conversations with people. That's all I do.
Yeah, good for you.
But when you don't stop, when you're persistent, and when the abuse comes, and I get attacked, I've had my arm broken.
Oh, have you?
Antifa.
Antifa. Do they follow you around, those Antifa?
Yeah, I get stalked all the time. They try to stop me from having a conversation.
Right.
So then I just film them and I make them the subject of my videos. And those end up actually helping me because those will get millions of views.
Right.
It's always the radical stuff that people retweet and everything.
Yeah.
So they're just helping me. I just deal with it. I never respond. I don't get emotional to this stuff. That's what they want. They're trying to provoke a response.
Right.
So it's just best to stay level-headed and calm. If someone hits me, I'm just going to take it.
I imagine you're a pretty emotionally stable person. So
according to Jordan Peterson's personality test.
Yeah, understand myself.
I looked at it today because I took it a few years ago.
Okay.
My neuroticism is in the 2nd percentile.
That's helpful.
So that's helpful. And a bunch of those character traits are definitely helpful for what I do, extroversion.
Yes.
Things like that.
So then you like people. So you like to engage with people.
Yeah.
But what they say doesn't affect you emotionally.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter
That's
what they
pretty.
say.
That's good. That's a good. Good for what did someone say? A joyful warrior.
That's right. Yeah.
It's good to be a
and high in
joyful
compassion and all that sort of stuff. So
yeah.
I guess I'm just kind of wired for what I do.
Yeah.
But everyone can do something.
Yes.
You know? This is one of those things throughout history, human psychology never changes. And it's a long story, but this has become the political movement of the day to push trans rights. Even though no one can describe what gender identity means. But it's all based on a lie, and people are afraid to talk about it. So it ends up just being a handful of people right now who are talking about it, but that's changing. And we just have to have courage. And no matter what you do, no matter what your skill set is, we all have different gifts and abilities. So people ask me all the time, what can I do? My answer is just do something.
Yeah.
You
do something that bothers you. Do something. If something bothers you, then look at that as that's your problem to deal with. Deal with it however you can, but that's not someone else's problem. If it bothers you, it's your problem. So if it bothers you that this is going on in school, that's your problem. Yeah. Deal with it somehow.
That's right. And there's all sorts of things we can do. But
sure, that you could write.
Yeah.
You could write.
You can have a conversation with your friends. You can go to a school board meeting.
Yeah.
And make your objections known. But it is possible to message this compassionately and truthfully without sounding hateful. You don't have to worry about that. You just have to learn a little bit about it and make your voice heard. And we're going to put a stop to this. And it's happening.
No, well, that's good.
This is only going to last for so long. And we're going to look back at this in 10 years, I'm very confident, and say, what the heck were these humans doing?
Well, why do you think it's come about? This such a basic thing, being a man or a woman, and that's changing. What's going on?
So this theory of gender identity was coined by a man named John Money, who worked at Johns Hopkins University in the 60s. And this idea floated around for decades in academia. But we really saw a turning point starting around 2010, 2015. Gay rights were one. All these LGBTQ organizations, they don't just close the doors when they reach their objective of gay rights. They change their objective to trans rights. They got to keep the donations flowing, keep everyone employed. And they've been successful in conflating these as the same things. Gay rights equals trans rights. Well, no, it doesn't. Most of these kids historically actually grew up to be gay. It's harming them. It's a totally different scenario. But everyone has been afraid to speak up because then they're anti-LGBTQ.
Right.
So this created the perfect storm for it to grow almost without any opposition. And people didn't understand what was going on. A lot of this was pushed into schools in secret. People didn't know what gender clinics were doing.
And people say, no, that can't be true. But it is true.
Right. And I don't blame them for saying that because it is so outlandish what's going on.
No, I have a friend whose daughter was 10 or 11 and there was a gender club at school that her friends went to that the parents had no idea about. And they had them identify their pronouns at the beginning of every day. And then they decided, what their name should be and that they wouldn't use it on their report card. And that name wouldn't go home. It would only be in the school. And your parents won't understand, so we won't tell your parents. And 6 months later, she's wanting to start taking puberty blockers and having surgery. But luckily your mother was listening and attentive and also really saying, when I was 13, I was confused. There was eating disorders. There've been contagions of cutting. There've been all these different things of girls done. This is the latest one. There will be another. And The problem is that going through puberty is very destabilizing, and everyone is destabilized by it, some more than others, but there's no easy way out. There's no easy way. You have to actually grow up.
That's right. And when I give public talks, I'll ask the women in the audience, who here was a tomboy growing up?
Right.
And half the hands go up.
Oh, yeah.
Who here loved going through puberty?
Yeah,
Never a hand goes up.
Yeah.
I say, congratulations, you're all transgender, right?
Right.
But this is a social contagion affecting girls. The media have been pushing this. This has been sold as a human rights movement. There's a ton of money behind it.
Yeah.
From nonprofits and from some billionaires. And
which billionaires?
Jennifer Pritzker, heir to the Hyatt fortune, cousin of J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois. He now identifies as a woman.
Right.
He's put tons of money into this, funding gender clinics. Martine Rothblatt, founder of XM Sirius Radio, another man who identifies as a woman. He's a transhumanist. John Stryker, who is another billionaire, has put hundreds of millions of dollars into this stuff. So there's tons of money behind it, also from the nonprofits, also from now governments. The UN is pushing this, the World Health Organization, the WEF.
Yeah.
All the leftist political parties, because this has been sold as being progressive. And
must be a lot of money in it.
There's tons of
money.
money.
I mean, not just for the surgeons, but in many ways.
Yes, from activists and activist organizations and all that. And so when I have conversations on the street, more than 90% of the population agrees with me. Most Democrats and liberals agree with me. Of course, on the far left, a lot of them are pushing it, but that's still just 10% of the population. Yet at the political class, the politicians, not one Democrat will say a thing against this, because then they're going to get canceled.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of them privately will agree. So we just have to continue to raise awareness about this, about the truth of this, and eventually we're going to win this battle. It's just a question of how many kids are harmed before we do.
How are your kids doing?
Fantastic. So both my girls know all about this. I don't worry a second about them. They're thriving academically. They're straight A's, thriving athletically, socially.
Did you have to change their schools?
No.
No?
No. So they're both in public school. And it depends on the school.
Yeah.
It depends on the teacher.
Yeah.
And it depends on your kid.
Yeah.
So half of these kids transitioning have autism. So if you have an autistic child, you need to be a lot more careful about public school. But I tell everyone, first week of school, talk to the teacher. Say, I'm not okay with you teaching gender ideology to my kid. You're going to find out right away where that teacher's at.
Right.
A lot of them don't teach this. But if you've got one of these, 23-year-old teachers with purple hair, you might have a problem.
Right.
So have the conversation.
Right.
And if that teacher is a problem, you need to get your kid out of that class. But we live in a community where this isn't being pushed too hard. The high school that my oldest daughter goes to is a brand new high school. The principal hired all the teachers, and so he's a good guy. He hired great teachers. None of them are really pushing this, but a lot of schools are a problem. So it depends on the situation.
Yeah. So you got to do your research.
You do. You've got to be active in your child's life. I always tell parents, read to your kids at night. Not just for the benefits of reading, but for the bond between the parent and child. That's when their inner thoughts from the day come out, and maybe they're just trying to delay bedtime, but you have these great bonding moments when you read to your kids at night.
I used to walk my son to the bus. It was 2.5 blocks. It wasn't very far, but I had a dog. So I would just walk the dog when he was on his way to school, and often that's when he would tell me what his plans were for the day. Yeah. You have to find those moments, especially once they get to be grade 9 or so. You have to find those moments. You can't just say what's on your mind. You're not going to get any information. You have to be there.
Right. Yeah. And then the closer the bond you have, obviously kids don't want to upset their parents, and kids are going to share more with their parents when you have a good tight bond.
Yeah.
And you have to have these conversations with your kids about this ideology when it's appropriate, age appropriateness, of course.
Yeah. Better sooner than later.
But that truth, when they learn that truth, acts as a shield for when these lies inevitably come, because it's just in the culture everywhere.
Yeah. So when you have an inkling that it should be said, that's the time to say it.
Right.
Don't put it off.
Yeah.
Right. Time is of the essence, because these are terrible problems that we have to face.
Yeah. It's a shame to say that, schools are dangerous, but even the Catholic schools are pushing this stuff. Josh Alexander, a young man in Ontario, got kicked out of his Catholic school for quoting the Bible.
Yeah, saying men are men and women are women.
Yeah, male and female, he created them.
Yes.
And for standing up for girls who didn't want boys in the bathroom.
Yeah.
So you have to have a good relationship with your kids, learn all about this, share the truth with them, and they're going to be fine. But we have to stand up against this because there's no such thing as a child being born in the wrong body.
No, no such thing.
And we should never be stopping the development of our kids. It's child abuse.
Thank you, Chris.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure, for sure.